Hello, everyone. Welcome to Podcasting Transparency. And today, well, to be professional here, Podcasting Transparency is where we will begin talking about things where we may get a little bit unprofessional. And our knowledge to know exactly what is going on so that we can experience new possibilities through interacting with people in everyday life that can form a beautiful catalyst to your personal development and the planet's. So I thank you everyone for being here. And today I have my brother, whom I have known for some months now. And I remember my friend, I think it's Veronica, who would tag you in my posts. They weren't really my posts because I was sharing from another source. But subject being along the lines of really taking a different look of what the word spiritual means and applying it to physicality, the material world, so more people can understand it. And so I believe my friend Veronica, whom I really barely know, whatever. So you found some of the information that I was sharing. And what I know about you is very little. And I don't know if we became friends on Facebook before or after. Facebook friends are very funny. Because a lot of people, even for myself, we don't necessarily know the people. And we just kind of accept them. Some people may be different. But to be very honest, I have seen some of the posts that you have shared, and I think they are good. I haven't really had many opinions. I don't really have many opinions to many people who post on Facebook, even on Instagram. Not saying they're bad or good, but that's really all I have to say about that. And so, Adam, what would you like to share about yourself, just as an introduction?
I would say the most important thing is that I embrace change, and that's been something innate in me. It's not necessarily something that comes easy to me, but we were talking astrology before the video started, and I resonate a lot with the symbologies and the archetypes of it because it explains a lot of things and it fits with certain things. And one of the things that Sagittarius is archetypically known for is being a free spirit. And so that is definitely a big part of my personality, I would say, even on a soul level. And so there's also, and you can go deeper into the astrology, which I'm not going to bore everyone with all the details because I know not everyone's into astrology, but understanding that I have a lot of that free spirit energy as well as this sort of rebellious energy, a rebel energy. And so I often don't feel like I fit into society. I feel very different from other people and weird. That was a big one for me to get over. Like, oh, people are gonna think I'm weird, and so I, would hide who I felt myself to be really because of wanting to receive people's approval or to make people happy or to have an easier time of a situation. And these days I've come to see the value both of relating to the collective in a way that's supportive and uplifting and loving, but also understanding that love has many different forms and can show up in many different ways and can be misperceived and misrepresented in a lot of ways too. So I've been sort of dismantling all of what I thought was the truth and what society had essentially told me, which is, society is full of lies. We tell ourselves lies all the time. Those are the peak ones. And so, deprogramming from all the lies to see, well, what's true and what's true for me, and how do I relate that truth to the world in a way that is loving and supportive and uplifting. And I by no means am a master. I fail all the time. I know it for sure because I'm, passionate and hot-headed and opinionated. And so, that can be received in a certain way, and people think spirituality is is very much in a box, you know, like all love and light and dulcet tones, and if you ever get angry, you're not spiritual, you know. And I don't believe that personally. I have come to learn through my own experience that anger can actually be save your life, can save your life. And so, you know, sometimes it has that potential to be a healing tool and catalyst as well. Not to say that we should, you know, get stuck in there or live there or even be attached to it, right? That's the ultimate thing about the spiritual journey, and that's where the Sagittarius comes in again, because that free spirit, the sort of like, you know, yogi meditating master, but not the sort of popularized yoga that I think you see these days in America. Especially America likes to put that positive spin on everything and kind of ignore, oh no, there's a shadow here that maybe, you know, I have to deal with, and you know, it's uncomfortable and I don't want to. So I think the real yoga literally means union, is to bring together, and in this case the opposites, the light and the dark, and how we all have those within us, and no one's perfect, and everyone's struggling, and everyone suffers, and you know, no matter what it looks like or what you think about that person, you know, they deserve compassion and respect and love. And so I work towards that too, even, you know, especially as I might perceive a failure on my part, you know, to deliver that in a moment.
Awesome. You're talking. I think for very prevalent in India, there is a opinion or tradition to not pick the dark and just do the yoga exercises, do the rituals, and this is something that's very common around the world. But the Western world has kind of adopted a lot of the Eastern techniques and traditions recently, and so I still think that tradition kind of lacks, in some sense, what it could be, because I know there's a lot of talk about the ego. There's a lot of talk about suffering and whatnot, and I think you mentioned about how we're supposed to avoid like anger or these bad feelings as a spiritual person. And there's a lot of work being done today of exposing how that's not the truly authentic way to really grow. And so I don't know if I have a question or a comment really, but I think it's more of a comment of how I believe there can be more specific information shared from the Eastern thought, the Eastern traditions about why our emotions come, not why our emotions come out, but how can we use these emotions that come out to not like look bad of ourselves or just like resort only to like a mantra or a certain, I don't know what they do exactly, but they do a lot of meditation. And but I don't know. I think I'm just kind of looking at my own perception right now through talking to you, and whether there's answers or questions in it. Um, you may or may not have anything to say about that, but I have something else. But
Okay, yeah, I would love to if I may address that, because I think it's really important, and it speaks to a big part of the problem. I think you nailed it, because it's basically, you know, the hip, trendy, marketable version of yoga, right? The athletic, the sexy bodies, the tantric sex, right? All the things that are really attractive to people. And, you know, American culture and lifestyle is built on that, right? This economic model of consumerism and buy, 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 buy. So it's like, okay, well, let's focus on what's the most marketable, so that and I think that there's a place for that in certain degrees, right? But like everything, if there's not a balance, we can have, you know, some issues that present themselves. And so you have a lot, I think, of you know, spiritual practitioners, or not to, I mean, I think everyone is spiritual, right? I think we are all spirits. And so, but if it becomes a form of ego, right? Like, oh, I'm spiritual now because I took a yoga class, right? And I'm sure there's someone out there
yeah,
who can relate to it that way, or has related to it that way, or people that do relate to it in that way, honestly, because it's become popular, right? People want to be popular, so they may not get involved in it for the right reasons. In fact, you know, I've been teaching yoga for now 8 years, and I've had a lot of clients who come at it for kind of the wrong reasons, in the sense that they want to get healthy and fit, right? And that's great, but here's the core issue that I was glad that why you brought this up. and this is something one of my great teachers, pointed out to me when I first started on my yoga path, that people get lost in thinking that it's just about the postures. The postures are just one path of the 8 paths. There's 8 parts to a full yoga practice. It's like a wheel and the spokes of a wheel, right? And if you don't have one of the spokes, you have no integrity in the wheel. It's going to fall apart. And so the asana path, which is 1/8 of the whole wheel, is the one that's focused on primarily. And you have meditation, which is another spoke. That one gets a little bit of coverage, but not as much practice, And then as we start to get into the other things like, ethics and morality and, continence and practicing self-discipline and restriction and, balance and all those other principles that are deeper and more internal, it gets lost by the wayside a lot. And whether it's because I would say, our culture doesn't really support that kind of spiritual growth, or because the people aren't interested in it, maybe it's a chicken and the egg, who knows, but it definitely gets overlooked to a, very problematic degree, because then people aren't actually getting in touch with the deep spiritual inner transformation that comes from disidentifying with those layers of the ego, which have so much to do with status, popularity, our image in the world, and all these different elements that people aren't necessarily tackling when they call themselves spiritual, and particularly because of the ego, or what's worse, perhaps the spiritualized ego that says, well, I'm perfect already and I'm spiritual and I don't need to do any work, right? There's nothing in me. I'm all light and love, and you're the one with the shadow and I don't have any shadow. What you talk about? People, I don't have any shadow. It's like, okay, maybe you're projecting, and that's the thing. As we start to separate ourselves from others, start to judge ourselves or others, right, as superior or inferior, whatever, it's all a big ego trap, right? And that's the ego, and that's how it's working, right, to separate things. At that point, you start to lose connection with the spirit, which is universal love, which is compassion, which is oneness and connectedness. And that's what causes all the disorder in the first place. So getting rid of the disorder, getting to the heart of our issues or spiritual diseases, is to peel back those layers of lies and false beliefs that we've had about ourselves and reality. And it oftentimes is very painful, because we have to deal with the trauma that may have been associated with it, or something happened in our lives. Maybe we didn't get the present we wanted, or maybe we didn't have, a parent in our life, or whatever happened, right, from anywhere. We can very easily start to make it mean something about ourselves, right? Taken on as an identity. Oh, well, I'm not lovable, or my parent didn't care for me, or whatever. And then we start to relate to the world from those things as if they were true. And they're not necessarily. And the biggest lie is the one of separation, that we are separate when we are all connected, even though we're all individual. And then the next one is that love is false, right? That love isn't real, or that, that's the next biggest lie. And with the world that we live in, it's kind of hard for people to stay connected to that. And so yoga is about bringing that back, but it really takes something. It's not just enough to go to the mat. You also have to look at the other 8 limbs and address the whole picture. Diet's also one of them too. Diet's very important.
Beautifully said. So, tracing back a little bit to a little bit of how I know you, or what I've seen you share. I've seen some of your posts about things that are going on in the world, and I would personally say, not wrong or right, but you have felt very strongly in some of your posts. Correct me if I'm wrong. Have you taken a break from posting? Sometimes I don't get people. Okay.
Not recently, not within the past maybe 6 months, but I've definitely gone through, and even actually, it depends on what you consider to be a break, but yeah, there are definitely periods where I take breaks, for sure. I think it's important.
Yes. Well, whether or not I'm seeing your posts or not seeing your posts, would you say, well, I think I became familiar with your name about a few months ago, or maybe it was longer, maybe even close to 5, around then. But would you say there's been a very intense shift in your life in that time period, or would you say there's there's a greater portion of your life where there's been more significant change, or perhaps this is just invalid? There's no right or wrong.
I don't very. I think it's the sort of relative term of like very significant shift, like because I don't necessarily know what would qualify for a very significant shift, but like I mentioned before, I embrace change. So I say it with that face because I'm kind of tired of it. I kind of just wish for things to be a little bit more stable at this point after 35 years of constantly changing and, you know, not only my own identity, but also my life experiences, right? Because those are often reflections and expressions of it. So, yeah, I mean, I might minimize the language a little bit because it sounded like really, really huge, but in a sense, that's also been a big part of my process. You know, like I've had a very complicated past and upbringing, and there's been, you know, dramatic instance after another after another. So that's kind of a theme for me in general. But as I've moved through that sequence of events, you know, it's been a sort of like ascension in the sense that things are getting better, right? Overall, there's this arc of improvement. So, you know, they call it a spiral in the healing journey. So it's yeah, there's a part of that spiral. I've been definitely going undergoing some transformations, which I feel are manifesting in a big way, but they're also taking time. So it's kind of like a slow burn kind of thing.
Can you kind of address one specific cause recently? You don't have to say something recent, but I'm just saying if there is something recent that has helped you embrace change or embrace this new shift. You said for 35 years you've been trying to get things more in order, something along those lines. And so I'm just curious if there is a specific something that you can recall, and maybe you've already said it, and I'm just projecting or perceiving it differently, where I'm not getting the answer I want, which may be true. But could you say if there's been any recent, like, specific events or reoccurring events? Perhaps it's like what I would call the typical awakening process, where the job, the relationships, there's that build up peak to like totally not knowing how to deal with it in the face of like people criticizing or standardizing how we should be, and then that just resulting from a huge like supernova.
Sure. Yeah, actually, it's funny because you kind of led me to the exact answer that I was going to give, and then at the very end of your question, you addressed specifically the heart of what I was already going to bring up, which is yes, there was something on that level, and it's not external so much as the external environment helped to catalyze the internal transformation. But you know, with this process of Facebook, I just actually posted a status that a few minutes ago before this interview, something to the effect of, I only started to really heal when I truly claimed even the unpretty parts of my experience, right? Myself, the world, whatever, right? And speak truth to that. And that was, you know, about 5 years ago when I had some major health turnarounds and things come up. And, you know, I went to communicate because communication is such a deep part of our experience, I would say in general. And for myself, it's huge. That's also another sort of
You went to communicate?
In general, meaning with the world about my experience, right? So I'll share a little bit about it. I actually, and I'll even say, you know, go as far as to say self-diagnosed my own stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma because of 30 years of evidence, right? It did not just come out of thin air. It was not spiritual bypassing. It was not seeking attention. This was hardwired evidence that actually came through a process of awakening to, you know, the sugar addiction, the emotional mental problems, the structures of life itself, right? The deeply seated self-hate, which is a big part of it too. So unearthing all of that, it's like, oh, wow, it came in like a lightning bolt. And whether I told people that I diagnosed it myself or not, what I did stress and emphasize, you know, and it wasn't supposed to be about me, and people will project that I'm, you know, egotistical because I talk about myself. Well, this is actually meant to be a teaching moment for others to learn from my experience, because the experience is widely applicable. This is not just something that applies to me. When you understand what causes disease, when you understand like the full picture, right? Not just one spoke of the wheel, then you can start to address it and repair the wheel and come back to wholeness, right? So I actually managed to reverse not only the cancer, but also all the other health issues that have come alongside that, including, other things that, still healing adrenal fatigue, right? Because that led to it. And that's been something that was happening for 20 years. So, people also don't necessarily understand, or, I've also been through the process of learning how to communicate these things better, that, even though I healed my cancer, like I still struggle with health issues because also the system is fighting us on a daily. It's not like it's just all my fault or I'm not perfect because I'm not eating perfect every day. It's like perfect spirituality. And if it's not, and it doesn't look that way, then, I can't go to you as my yoga teacher, or I can't follow you because you can't be an idol for me. I can't rely on you to tell me what to do in every moment. I'm going to have to ask myself, what? No, I can't use you as my guru. So, you know what? That's fine. I don't want to be a participant in pedestals anyway. But the point is of sharing that story, and the general arc of it is that communicating this to people was extremely difficult. I mean, I've managed to get all of that out
I know
in
that.
a couple of minutes now because I've been doing it for essentially 5 years because of Facebook. And, I have a lot of issues with Facebook and major megalithic corporations that, seek to subvert, the Constitution, et cetera. But I have come to understand that there's this suppression that goes on. And even inside that suppression that came through Facebook in the many myriads of ways, mostly through people, right? Mostly through people, individual people in my life, even people who were friends with me, who I actually had to stop being friends with for speaking this truth, because they would say, oh no, you can't cure cancer. You can't heal cancer. You can't reverse cancer. You're crazy. You're a crazy person. Da 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 da. Never mind all the evidence. Never mind all the articles. Never mind all the proof. All the proof in the world doesn't matter in that case. So I started to look at, well, what's the core of all this? And like, narcissistic personality disorder and people not being able to actually listen or process the information or even have empathy for others. And so I started to see, wow, this country is lacking in a lot of empathy. And it was very staggering. That was an awakening of its own, because I had to come to the place where I was like, well, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to let this take me down, or am I going to overcome? Because I knew I could. If I had it in me, I knew it was there for me to overcome. But it was a spiritual test to say, what am I going to do with this, right? Why am I going to overcome? Is there a purpose for me? Is there a purpose for me to continue being here? Because I'm tired. I've been, dealing with these health stuff my whole life because of all the different factors, the system being one of them, my own choices being another. But what am I going to do now? What am I going to do with this now? And it was like, well, the only thing that made sense to my mind is to help others who are going through the same thing. So when I first started coming public about it, right, it was not just to talk about my own story, because I had no other forum. I couldn't talk to almost anyone in my life about it because almost no one believed me, right? And so I went to Facebook. I'm like, okay, here's a place where I can express myself, where I can vent it out, where I can just talk and maybe even get some human connection and support, right? Because that was the biggest challenge, especially at that time, healing the cancer on my own, with diet, with, and even just talking about it with strangers or people or loved ones in my life, telling them that I was going about it the way that I chose to go about it would activate their major fear and projections and control mechanisms and trying to control me in my healing process. No, you can't do that. We got to go to the doctor right now. And I'm like, no, I've been inside and outside of that system back and forth. It's failed me over and over again. What aren't you listening to the story about? I'm actually doing something. And that's when I started to notice that they were actually coming from a place of narcissistic personality disorder on some level, because they weren't actually hearing or listening to me. It was about them and their feelings about it, right? Not my own process. And so I started to have to become a little bit more independent to say, no, I'm doing it this way and this is my way. And they would have the arrogance to say, but you can't just not do anything about it. And that would blow my mind. I would get triggered a lot in the past about that. I mean, I'm okay for it now, but just thinking about it, because the total invalidation and overlooking of all the work that I was doing, it was the single hardest thing I ever did in my life. I'm not saying that it's easy to cure cancer, that it's going to happen overnight. I mean, who knows what's possible with technology, right? But in my experience, it took years to not only deal with the physical cancer, but also the emotional, mental components of what allowed it to manifest in the first place. And so just being able to talk about that, getting it out, connect with someone in a way, in a very strong way, helped save my life, because speaking that truth helped me to process it, to see it, to be able to relate to it, get further information, feedback, positive support, right? That's where the community aspect of the healing is so important, because, and a lot of people are also lacking that too. And that's why a lot of people don't make it, because it's almost impossible to do on your own. I did have some support. I was staying with my parents. They provided me that, but they weren't emotionally capable of dealing with that. So I don't blame them at all. I have total love and respect and gratitude for all their support in the ways that they could provide it. And I don't blame people either, honestly. If anything, I just look at it as a systemic issue, a systemic error where people don't understand what's actually going on and what to do about it. So I speak out, I speak up, I tell people, hey, listen, this is how you can do it. And in the beginning, it was definitely kind of like hero complex, like I need to save everyone. And after a short while, I realized, okay, this isn't working. People don't want to hear it. And then, finally it just became, I was like, okay, I'm going to speak my truth for me and for those who are interested. And for those who aren't, that's it. That's fine. So I've been able to come in contact with that authentic voice, which, sorry for going on the long tangent. This was quite a lot to unpack.
Oh, it's perfect.
In just a few moments. But the ultimate answer to your question is that it was getting over all of that and the social implications of speaking my truth, right? And not filtering it down or watering it down, being authentic about it, being true about both the dark and the light, the struggle and the triumph, instead of just like, yay, I beat cancer. Well, it was also fucking hard, right? Like, and people don't want to hear that, whatever, right? Because of whatever, it doesn't even matter. But for me, over the past few months, and I can even relate it to the astrological, Venus retrograde, because Venus is about relationships and values, value and money. And there was a major transformation that happened over the course of the past few months, let's say 3 months or so. And inside of that, I really got more in touch with my own value. And that's something that's been hard for me my whole life. I've struggled with insecurity and self-worth issues for pretty much the whole time, which are related to the health issues and the mental issues, right? It's all connected. And so I finally got to a place where it's like, you know what? I can't live for other people's truth anymore. I can't stop the value of my truth that could be shared with others because it's going to upset certain people. I cannot walk around landmines for the rest of my life avoiding people's triggers. It's not my responsibility to please everyone. I finally got over this obsessive need to people please. And don't get me wrong, I'm still interested in being of service and I want to make people happy. That's a part of me that I do choose to grow and cultivate. But it's different when it's an attachment, it's an addiction, and it's chains and identity and limitation. So breaking through that to say, regardless of what people think of me, I have value. I have value and I'm worthy and I can speak this truth. And there will be people who find it valuable. And I can speak to those people. And for the people who don't find it valuable, and for the people who don't want to connect and they want to hate or insult or what, I don't have to pay any attention to them at all. So that was a major breakthrough because it's allowing me to speak more truth to the things that I have held back, because I still hold back a lot. And some things I think you do need to hold back. I think if, it's just all about truth, sometimes you can forget that there's also compassion is probably just as important as truth, right? So there are other subtle nuances that come along with it, but I'm finding more truth as it comes out of me is allowing me to experience more healing and love because it's being real with myself, right? It's being able to accept my flaws, not try and suppress them, not try and deny my own shadows, and also do the same thing for others. Because if I'm denying my own shadows, I'm going to do the same thing in someone else. And then I'm going to project onto them and make them wrong and lose that compassion and lose the empathy and start to create that egoic separation, which I think most of us are lost in, honestly, on some level or another. And to the degrees that we have pulled back the layers of those attachments and healed the pain and the shadows and the fear and gotten in touch with that inner source of love, which is the truth, right? Then we can start to experience that love and compassion for others. And I think that's where we're headed. And I think we have a lot of work to do to get there.
Wow. Um, I just had a really interesting experience just now. Uh, Multiple things came up, and I'm just going to use this space here to share that. I resonate with a lot of what you said.
Thank you.
So, okay, so I'll start with number one. I'd love how I could be like super calm right now, and I don't have to be very quick. I think that's the standard of like in the media industry. You have to be very quick. And as I've done in other interviews, there's been times where there's just been silence. It's like it's okay to not always have a question or always have a response, and be in communication with another person.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing that space in. Actually, it's a nice balance to me and my very fiery style. So I appreciate that grounded energy.
So as you were talking, um, I was listening to what you were saying. I was resonating. At the same time, I was also thinking in my own life, there's a situation that I go through, and it comes in every now and then, and I keep them in my awareness um, every now and then, and to be honest, this deals with sexuality and pornography addiction, and I was listening to you, and I was resonating to what you were saying. I was clicking the experiences you've had in my life, that you've had in your life. And at the same time, I was also focusing on some of these challenges that I have. And I know there's a lot of people out there that also go through the same spiritual and unspiritual, whatever we want to call it. But um, I found it interesting to be in my own thoughts and try to go through the different ways I can look at this obstacle and see how it's not serving me fully. Sometimes I have answers, sometimes I don't, and it's different through time, through my past. But that's another thing I want to add on to the multiple things that came up. So I don't want to make this too long, but this is all perfect here. So one thing I'm partly sharing this because there were, as you were speaking, there's two conversations going on at once. Most people have their own internal dialogue of what they think of the other person, of the information, right or wrong. Oh my God, that's a rabbit hole right there. I don't know if I want to go there, but this is important. There's an important thing. There's a standard. There's a label of how like you should be constantly listening to the other person. You can't also be in your head at the same time. You know, you gotta be respectful. So I was going through that just now, and I guess I'm just having more acceptance towards myself and allowing myself to be in this space, this experience. And this conversation is leading me to something I wanted to add. Another thing I wanted to add. I guess it would be important to add it now. I may forget exactly everything that I wanted to say. It's all good though. Is because I'm bringing this up as one of the obstacles in my life, pertaining to sexuality. I think it is one of the main tools used in the world to sort of steal people's creative energy. As we may already know, we know sex is like a two-edged sword, like everything. It can be used to help better someone's spiritual relationship, and authentically, or not. And there are places people can go. I think sex is like that, and they're not the norm. They're not as big as Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what I know. But everyone has their own focus of addictions that are more or less. But I think generally in the society in the West, in Europe, places around the world, sexuality, appearances, exploitation of the body parts is, I would say, pretty quite up there into how it's used to suck people's energy through everyday life. So whether or not you have an opinion on that or not, I would like to ask you what you think would be an important way for people in the world to find balance or transformation in this. I would say it's a very complex thing that's going on in the world, but I believe anything complex can be made simple. It just depends on how we look at it, how we want to approach it. And I'm just going to give you the opportunity here if you want to say anything about that.
Sure. Thank you. I agree with pretty much everything you just said. And that was a huge part of my awakening as well. You know, the spirals came over many different sessions, over many different seasons. But I was about 24 when I came across the path of tantric celibacy. And so whether that attracts people or not, I mean, it's something that was kind of innate in me. I suspect past life involvement because I thought about it. Honestly, after my pubescence, I was 14 and already wishing to be asexual. I was like, oh my God, this is too much stress, like the desire. And it would, you know, I could hardly think about anything else in so many ways. And I didn't want it. I didn't want all that pressure. And then, you know, more details in my own personal experience that made that more challenging. So I don't want to get into that now. But whether you choose tantric celibacy, which I highly recommend, there is also the path of tantric sexuality, which more people seem to be interested in. A lot of people don't want to restrict themselves. I think also in American society, it's like we just want more and more and more and more, which is a beautiful thing in terms of abundance and affluence, and those are great symbols. But again, you know, too much of a good thing. So there's a great value in also restricting ourselves and disciplining and finding the yin-yang center. So with tantric sexuality or tantric celibacy, if either path you could choose to take, there is a technique that's extremely powerful, that is extremely simple and extremely beneficial. And it's called the Microcosmic Orbit. And you can use it whether you're male or female. I especially recommend it for males because of the way the bodies are different. You know, males lose fluids every time. Well, not all males, not every time, all times, but most of the time men lose fluids, and those are very vital fluids. Talk about creative energy, never mind testosterone and also the spiritual energy that's associated with them, never mind the fluids, when most people are chronically dehydrated and having health issues because of that. So I encourage men to save their fluids a little bit longer and work towards, you know, the possibility of experiencing orgasm in different ways, because that's one of the things that Tantra can teach us, that we can actually have full body orgasms without even ejaculating. And this is possible. I've, you know, known people who are capable of this. I've experienced some of this phenomenon myself. You know, I had an orgasm that lasted for literally 60 seconds. It was over 60 seconds, and it was incredible. It was, I mean, you know, it was a spiritual experience. It was transcendent. And this is the kinds of things that are available to us. So I highly recommend it. Not only does that, okay, so what is the microcosmic orbit? Well, it basically deals with the natural flow of energy in the body, in the spine, and the, you know, Sushumna, the central energy canal, right? But it's a little bit more complex than that because there's multiple directions. So I'm going to just change my position here. You can see you're going to inhale that energy up the back and down the front of the body. So it starts at the tailbone. You can imagine that this is like a little vacuum or suctioning device for the sexual energy that's created by the gonads and in the pelvic region. Whether you're male or female, this will still benefit you. And you draw the sexual energy up the tailbone as if it were a vacuum, and particularly focusing at the third eye center. The third eye center is where the pineal gland is. It's a very, very pivotal gland of the endocrine system that has so much to do with helping to balance out the blood and our serotonin, melatonin, you know, all the dopamine, everything. And so it's also the spiritual eye, right? It's where we have the spiritual insight and connection to our higher self, higher dimensions, higher understanding, beyond just the third dimension physical plane. So as we start to draw the sexual energy up through the chakra system, it actually helps it flow. It helps it flow because the problem is most of us have been very damaged sexually, to be quite honest. because of the phenomenon that you've described, because of the hypersexualization of culture, while also the shaming and the suppressing of the sexuality at the
Yeah.
same time. And that's exactly why there's so many problems, because it's like bait and switch, right? It's like, oh, well, on the marketing side, we're going to make you obsessed about sex and put sex everywhere over even like crayon ads or whatever,
Yeah.
But now on the religious side, we're going to tell you that all that's wrong. Meanwhile, they're both like standing hand in hand, shuffling money in their pockets, right? So, and then we're the ones who are really left with most of generally the world is left with these repercussions. So getting rid of the shame, getting rid of the blame, getting rid of the suppression, especially the suppression, that's the biggest issue, because, however deep you want to go into targeting or things like this, the structures as they are cut us off from this basic life force. And that is a huge detriment to our health, vitality, and well-being, because that is the creative energy, right? The life force itself. You can create a baby, you can create a new life, you can create a masterpiece, a book, a movie, right? You can create anything. That's our choice as free will, sovereign, divine creator beings, right? And so when we cut ourselves off from that energy, or when we, receive all the programming that, subconsciously cuts us off from that energy, then we are stuck, suppressed, depressed, denied, deflected, shamed, and shadows of our true selves, because we're totally out of touch with that. So as we start to use that microcosmic orbit, it helps to actually draw the sexual energy up through all of the chakra systems, so then it becomes a holistic experience, right? We're not just stuck in the sexual baser emotions and experience, especially once we bring it to the heart. So it comes up to the third chakra, that's the mind, and we can get lost in like power struggles and like relationship dynamics. No, you feed me. No, you feed me. Or when we get to the heart, we have that unity, that oneness, that compassion, that love, right? And that's when we enter the spiritual dimensions. And as we start to bring it up to the full length of the body, then we can start to experience the oneness, the connectedness with all things, even out into the universe, as well as our fellow man and woman. And this process is very, very powerful and effective at that. The mind can often just think, oh, this is so simple. I'm just going to breathe up from my tailbone to my third eye. Nonsense, right? That's the ego trying to stop you from growing, because it is so simply powerful. Just doing this practice every day, particularly for men, I would say, because from my own experience as a man, being so suppressed sexually and having this be a big part of my healing experience, being able to diffuse and control and master and get a handle on my own sexual desires and energy and, at that time, compulsions, right? It helped me to evolve as a person. I was no longer a slave to my sexuality. I was like, oh, well, it's integrating now. It's actually connecting with my spirituality and my heart. And so now I don't have meaningless sex. I can't. It's not something that I want to do. I'm not even interested in it. I also don't watch porn anymore after many years of struggling with addiction and non-addiction. Finally, I realized, you know what? I want the real thing. I don't want to waste my precious, vital life force on a stimulation. I deserve, right? I value myself enough to know that I can have the real thing. And that for me was a huge breakthrough, because I was engaging in that because it's all I believed I could have. And so when I saw that clearly, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to believe that. I choose not that. I choose to love myself enough to know that I deserve better and stand for better. And, interestingly, how life will respond in kind. And, I've been getting experiences to reflect that choice and decision, because it's all about self-love, right? We all get to love ourselves and master that part of ourselves. Not what religion says we should do, not what the government says, not even what I or you or any, what's true for you, what's true for each of us inside, what does our heart say? And what does that feel like? How can we bring more love to ourselves? Stop with the martyr, stop with the saving the world. I'm talking to myself, of course, here too, right? But this idea, this concept of spirituality, that we need to save everyone outside and never even love ourselves, never even have compassion for ourselves. And that ultimately was my lesson with the healing of the cancer. Aside from, clearing the self-hate, clearing the resentment that I was experiencing towards others for not being able to support me with the compassion that I needed. Well, I saw it's like I can feel like a victim and blame them for not giving me what I needed, or I can give myself what I need. I can give myself that compassion that I need. And that was when it really started to turn around. So that's, I'd say the most important thing. Have compassion for your sexuality. It's a sacred thing. It's a sacred, 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 beautiful thing. And once we start to relate to it in that way, we're going to start to relate to ourselves in that way. And we're going to start to relate to each other and the world and life in that way. And I think that's, again, where we're headed. You know, we have some work to do to get there, but it's our birthright. It's every human being's birthright.
Very beautiful. Yeah, we are definitely collective going through, I would say that we're on the top transitions, the peak experiences in a graph into how much shame, suffering, suppression there is. And as you said, the diversity of like with the marketing industry, and then there's religion. A few centuries ago, or even Middle Ages, whatnot, 1,000 years ago, there wasn't really so much the marketing side. It was in the markets physically, but now our market is used to come into our home, into our smartphones, our laptops, and that is a very interesting thing. And so I think it's been said around the whole. It's being said a lot more in the community how things are being sped up to be seen for what they are. And so I think we're at a time when a lot of this stuff, as you were saying, being brought up to what we can do about it and why it's not working. And aside from like why it's not working, just like affirming or being unashamed and saying that this is going on and no one is talking about it. There's some, but for the most part, very interesting.
Sorry, did you ask a question and I just spaced out? Okay, all right. I thought it was I thought not, but I just wanted to double check. I like that you take the space. You know, I like that you give the space. And yoga is about creating space in the body and in the mind. So it's not necessarily as natural for me as my fire energy. I do have some earth grounding, which I appreciate being reflected, as I mentioned. So something that just occurred to me, I want to be careful because I know it's important to be careful with your words, and some people can misinterpret things. In terms of healing, I don't want to make healing seem like, an impossible mountain to climb because of my own experience and the challenges that I had. I do believe healing can be miraculous and easy, and maybe not. Maybe it's going to take discipline. Maybe it's going to take structure and time and patience. I think both of those things are possible. I just wanted to point out that, it's important to look at both sides, right? Because of the popularized spirituality and, a law of attraction, and there's a lot of truth in that. But again, anything taken too far can lead us down the wrong path. So it's not just all positive, right? There will be negativity throughout the experience that helps us grow. And that's the way that, the negative and positive unite. I just wanted to clarify that for, anyone who may be going through their own healing process, that, it's just about the integration. It is absolutely possible for everyone.
Good point. Good point. So, a couple of discussions ago, we were having, before what you just said, I mentioned I had things come to me. And so one of the other things was relating to having compassion to the older generation. And though I think a lot of people look at them as like being insufficient or incapable of sharing wisdom or behavioral patterns to go beyond surviving needs into something that is a human need. Surviving is human, but I think the word human is being transformed, especially in this century, in this modern day, of the totality of what it means to be human. A lot of talk about honesty, vulnerability, acceptance, forgiveness, whatnot. And so we can see how the past generation, they didn't have technology, and though some of them didn't have to require technology to come into this human definition that people are coming to recognize more so now. That a lot of them didn't have in their community. There weren't a lot of people in the community that were very outspoken, spiritually speaking. And now people have the internet, and it's different. You're in your home, you're on your laptop, on the phone, and you'll see just around the corner, down from someone else's post, someone talking about spirituality, something that 50 years ago, I think there was a big trend in the 70s, although it still wasn't a norm in the social context, the business industrial context out in your job and whatnot. But people talk to each other a lot more like neighbors, I believe. I sense it. Even though it may not be totally authentic, but I guess what I'm just trying to say here is one way to have more compassion towards the older generation is that they didn't have some of the tools we have now. Mm-hmm. Though on the inside, the kingdom of God is always within us, still, there's a lot of forces and energy built into people and put on people externally so that perhaps they won't be willing to be honest about what they don't know, what they do know, spiritually speaking, or just, it doesn't even have to be spiritually, just saying what we're feeling is not working emotionally. That is a huge jump just for myself looking back. Like, how could someone do that in a world where there's no technology, there's no Facebook groups, and where I think that's a major hub right now for spirituality. But I'm sure there's different, but it's amazing. Okay. A lot of juice.
I love that you said that, and I think it's really great to ground me. You have this nice grounding energy, and that's something that I get to practice too, because I can be impatient, right? Because I want the change right now. So I'm like, and let's go quickly. Let's do it. So if some people aren't on my time frame, I can find myself losing patience. I do my best, but recognizing that, right? Remembering that, because that's so true. And that's part of what I was talking about before when I was, going on my sort of dual-sided relationship with Facebook, to say that despite the fact of whatever, comes with it, the good and the bad, the profound good for me in being able to connect with Facebook was being able to express my truth, right? But not just being able to express it, being able to interact with the truths of others as that related, and it became this huge, flowering experience of communication and understanding on various levels of consciousness. And so through that process of being able to get it out, to vent, and that's been a big part of my process too, to understand that it's okay to need to talk about it, right? Sometimes just talking about it is enough, and you feel better. And so for the people who don't get that, for the people who haven't given themselves that because they were severely programmed and suppressed as children, I mean, who amongst us was it, right? And now this whole PC police thing, trying to tell us what words are legal and not legal, so it's so vital and empowering to be able to learn those communication skills. And I'm so grateful that I got the experience through Facebook and the courage that, the vulnerability and all that stuff that I went through, and the horrible, hate stuff that also came alongside of it, and using that as a tool to not take that personally, right? So, yeah, the compassion is key because they didn't have that experience, right? And that's what compassion is about, is being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and still be okay with them not putting themselves in yours, right? And maybe see a little bit of the bigger picture and say, okay, well, they're struggling with something, how can I best support them in a way that's also honoring of myself, and, where we're all honored and respected, and compassion doesn't have a barrier on where it exists, So that practice, I think, is really good for some of us fast talking youngsters, maybe, to remember. So thank you for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What made you want to do this interview today?
Good question. I noticed that you were kind of in the top list of people on my active Facebook feed. I believe there's an algorithm in Facebook that has some authenticity to people who are on your active feed that have more of a connection to people who you may have connected with in the beginning of Facebook
Hmm.
that may have very little interest in what you have now. Um, but so I think that there's that element, and the other element is I haven't seen some of the information you have shared in a little while, and that has uh, okay. There's two things here that sparked my curiosity to what's going on with you, and I think you have been. You said you have been posting, but I just haven't been seeing it.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, um, I was curious to what where your stuff was in comparison to. I think there were some messages we exchanged not too long ago, very briefly, about just you were talking about your gratitude towards the other information that I was sharing, or something along these lines, and it's been helping you along your journey. Um, that is it.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of shadow banning. That's apparently a thing now. I think that
I
might
know
be,
that. Yeah.
yeah, because I have been sharing a lot recently. Like, it depends, you know. I'll take a couple days here or there. I've taken stints in the past of maybe like, before the 6 month period, because I've been pretty active for the past 6 months. I've also been working more on Facebook. I'm actually, creating connections and, serving clients through social media these days. So I've been invested more, especially because in the past 6 months, I knew that that was something I wanted to do and intend. Um, and but yeah, I mean, before that, there were periods of maybe like sometimes 2 weeks or maybe even a month if I was feeling very introspective. But I haven't. Now I've been posting pretty steadily, so it's possible, the algorithms also work against us sometimes.
Yeah.
So that happens. 1984, circa 2018.
Whatever it is what it is.
So I thank you for engaging me in this discussion today. I had no idea honestly what to expect when you're like, okay, we're going to start recording. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So I think it was a really great questions, really great topics to bring up, and really important. I hope it benefits a lot of people in their awakening and their own ascension to their higher self.
Yes, me too. So yeah, we reached 57 minutes. I think it's it's so funny. I don't think we talked about it on the recording, but right before we were recording everyone, um, we had no idea we were actually going to be doing a recording on certain levels. I guess no, that's that, and we're just saying how like we wanted to schedule something to, and but like we talked about a pod being on the podcast, but we weren't clear on like when we were going to do it, and so we just left it up to like whatever's going to happen. So that's what happened, but we didn't really know it was going to happen. I was eating French toast and turkey bacon while the Facebook Messenger while you called me. I was like, okay, and that was fun. That was fun. But my days are quite open right now. That's a grace, but um, any whatever we're doing, no matter how busy it is, it can still be looked at as a grace. It's just shifting that perception, shifting our choices and experience to really embody the blessings that are everywhere, every moment, having that forgiveness, acceptance, and peace, patience, and all the virtues, whatever, in the little intricacies of the hustle and bustle. That's a very uh, interesting process for myself, and I think it is for those who are going through it. But it's definitely a big challenge for many more. as they are not looking at it or saying that there are different perspectives. So perhaps you want to comment back on that. Perhaps you just I'm not really expecting anything right now, but yeah, it's been 59 minutes, and there was a couple other things that were in my mind, but I just want to be clear on our intentions and seeing if you would like to perhaps schedule another time because you may have something in your schedule. So.
Well, I what time is it? Sorry, I couldn't hear you because the phone was a little bit choppy. How long has it been?
It's been about 1 hour.
Okay, that's what I thought you said 59. So
right now.
Okay, so if I mean, it depends, I would say, on how many questions you have. I mean, if it's, just another couple of minutes, I don't see any problem continuing.
Okay. So just generally, what would you say one of your goals are right now?
So it's great question. My two top goals are to have a fully thriving astrology practice. I just started doing astrology professionally last year after about, I started in 2011. So yeah, about 8 years, 7 years of study. And so, it's been slowly building, and I've been kind of shying away from it as I've learned to, not be so shy and actually say, okay, this is who I am. This is what I want to do. So I've been growing it more and more. That's also part of me claiming that truth, right? It's like, well, this is really what I want to do. So this is really what I'm going to do. And so I've been working on that, building that. I recently just finished my website after a year of WordPress nightmares.
WordPress!
Yeah, thank you.
WordPress!
No,
Great.
no more WordPress ever. Perhaps never again. I feel like I need an exorcism after working with that thing. I managed to find, I originally got it because they said it's better for the SEOs and whatever, but it was just so user friendly and so unnecessarily complex that it took me a year almost of strong heavy emotional labor. And then finally I snapped a couple days ago, and I called up the server, and I'm like, what other options do we have? I found another option, and within like an hour and a half, 50% of the site was done. And then within a couple of days, the rest of the site was done. So there's that. It's the rawlifeyoga.com. I'm showcasing services. I'm also offering special deals right now for the holidays and for New Year's, supporting people on accessing that higher self energy. It's one thing for me to talk about myself and my own process, but it's another thing to allow that be a springboard for others to activate their own inner awakening, right? I'm just a reflection of anything that someone else resonates with. And so I'm not a pedestal, I'm not a savior, but I am a guide on that process to say, well, no, you're worthy of love. This is that, and like uplift the collective. That's one of my goals, because we are only going to get there together. That much I know for sure. And I know a lot of people really need support. And I feel like there is a spiritual awakening happening right now. I feel like people are starting to sort of like pull the blindfolds off and see this, mind matrix we live in, particularly in the United States, right? Where it's just like work, money, work, money. United slaves of America. I heard that the other day. I was like, yeah, while we're symbolically the most free, yet ironically in practicality, not. So I feel like Americans are also coming to this great awakening of understanding that the world is not exactly what we've been told, and spirituality is actually something maybe to look into. And that's one of the reasons why I love astrology the most, and why I want to focus on that the most, because it is objective and subjective at the same time. It's left and right brain. And so it kind of helps us to transcend this duality war we have between the polarities of light and dark, masculine and feminine, bringing them into that whole yin yang and saying, oh, wow, there's a higher perspective now based on that integration. And astrology is a great way to do that, because it's just about the moment of your birth, the snapshot of the heavens of that time, and what that looks like as it shows up for you in your own experience. And it's been a huge part of my awakening. That's why I even talk about it with people, not only because I love astrology, which I do, but to teach about the archetypes, right? I'm big into psychology. I was pre-med working to become a psychiatrist when I was in college before I took the, untraditional route. And I love psychology and psychotherapy and all of that psychoanalysis. And I'm a big, big student and fan of Carl Jung. And he was all about the symbology. It's all about the symbols and the archetypes. And Freud was into that too, right? They worked together. And understanding, because this is how the subconscious mind works, through the archetypes and the symbology. That's one of the reasons why symbols are so important in terms of marketing and things like this, right? Because it gets into the subconscious mind and it's a program, essentially, the symbol itself. It sort of like becomes a part of the mind and becomes a part of the experience. So when we can start to relate to that deeper level of the symbolic, archetypical nature of reality in ourselves, right? It also helps us to transcend that ego, because if we think, oh, I am this, well, it's kind of like, I am only this, right? If you say I am this, it's like, okay, everything else is pushed away. So even in the whole one sign identity, it's like, oh, well, I'm a Virgo, right? I could say that, but that's just my sun sign placement. And there's all the other planets, there's all these other things. So I'm also a Sagittarius, I'm also a Scorpio, I also have a lot of Leo, right? And even a lot of Gemini, right? Which is the talking. So it explains why I'm this crazy, dark, fiery spiritual healer who talks a lot and freaking, likes to be, at the center of the stage. So there's like all these different things coming along, and also doesn't like to be at the center of the stage because that's Scorpio Leo, right? So it's like, okay, wow, maybe that's why I'm crazy. I would think it was crazy, right? Because I call it the look at me, don't. Yeah, right. I call it the look at me, don't look at me syndrome. It's like Leo wants to be the star of the show, while Scorpio wants to stay hidden, right? Scorpio's shadows and Leo's the sunlight. And it's like, look at me, don't look at me. Look at me, don't look at me. And like, I have struggled with that too, right? We've talked about that in this interview today, is that the parts of myself is like, well, I don't want to be the center of attention, but I need to be to deliver this message. So that's honestly, the main reason why I chose to do this work and become more public about my story. I was like, well, it's not about me, actually, even though it looks like me and I'm talking about me, but it's actually not about me at all.
Yeah. Awesome answer. Awesome. So that was a few minutes, and so though I have one other question.
Go for it.
All right. Well, I welcome you if you want to just kind of perhaps answer it in an introductory way, and perhaps lead into another interview we may want to schedule where I will know exactly what to do for that. So I'll leave it up to you whether you want to just give a little piece or you want to take a bigger bite at it. So yeah. So the question is regarding astrology and its roots. And so I have heard a little bit about astrology, and I've had my natal chart, but I've read my natal chart. I've read a little bit of other things, haven't been so interested, but I do resonate. To it. And so my question is, I have understood the roots of astrology from the sources that I've read, that it goes back into certain people in history that were able or called to look at the star placements, and telescopes is a new thing. So there were other tools that people used. This is just from my experience, correct me if I'm wrong. There's other tools that people used, and they had this inner calling to really find the silver lining between the stars and what's going on the Earth. And so sometimes in astrology, I see how there's different astrological signs or zodiacs that are affiliated with kings and sort of the roles kings played according to the locality, the community, the place in the world, or whatever. It's so complex, man. So I guess that basically, I'm just going to sum it up. Some of the information I feel is more relative towards what happened in history rather than universal characteristics that can be applied to now. I don't feel like I have a lot of information towards how they depicted the relationship with the stars to what was going on, to a significant moment in history or significant circumstance in some society towards those who did connect it and what was happening. So I don't even know if it needs to be answered, but that's just kind of, I just think about it a little bit.
Well, I think you're expressing a reconciliation moment that a lot of students of astrology, or people who are maybe new to astrology can experience, which is that it's not predeterministic, right?
Hmm.
It's not saying that the stars dictate everything that happens on the planet. It's more about potentials. I would give it maybe like the sense of an electric potential. You could even say it, right? It's like if the energy is there, a lightning bolt can strike if there's something to set it off, right? And so it's not to say that a lightning bolt will definitely strike or we know exactly where it's going to strike, but we can know it's very likely that there will be a lightning bolt because of the energy that's present. And so with the planets themselves and the stars and all of consciousness, it's essentially what it comes down to. We're starting to take our focus away from the microcosm of self into the macrocosm of self, and understanding that there is no separation between those two things, that us, the planet, the stars, they're all connected and interconnected. And so when we start to understand that connection and study based on that understanding, I was like, well, okay, so how does the above reflect the below, right? As above, so below. So what's going on in the stars that's reflected here in my life in this moment, or in the planets? Particularly we focus on the planets and our own star. But with regards to the planets themselves, they're all energy. Everything in the universe is energy. And, underneath the physical, the atoms vibrating, that's a vibration and energy. And so every single planet has its own unique vibratory frequency, right? They have their own signature. And so those energy waves are actually being emitted by the planets. And it's pretty wild if you think about how the ancient Greeks and then Romans would actually relate to the planets as gods. They did. They really believed that they were gods. And it's a really, really fascinating endeavor to consider that maybe these celestial bodies are actually bodies of sorts, right? We call them that, and have their own consciousness. They actually have a vibration or frequency or consciousness. There are those who also say that everything is consciousness, right? It's all one, it's all connected. So if the planets themselves are conscious and they have their own specific energetic frequencies that they are constantly emitting, right? The relationships between those frequencies, vibrations, and energy waves is constantly varied, and it's constantly reflected in our own relationship to that energy based on how that energy was frozen in time in our mind, body, spirit complex at the moment of our birth. So it's very vast. You spoke accurately to say that it's complex. It's a very complex system. It's also as infinitely complex as anything. There's as many schools of astrology as there are styles of music. And every single one seems to have its own valid perspective. It's wild to try and reconcile all of that. But that's why I stressed the point of the archetypical symbolic understanding of astrology, because then when we get into the right brain, we also get into spirit and intuition and symbology, and we can connect also with the higher self. We need the left brain too. We're not trying to leave it behind altogether, but we overuse it in most cases because we've also been, trained to do that. And if we look at it from just a linear perspective of understanding, okay, direct connections, right? Where is the direct connection? We may not always find it. There are often correlations. Sometimes there will be direct connections, right? But it's not about left braining our way through the whole thing. It's about pulling back, seeing the symbols, and then applying it in a way that actually makes a difference. Like, what's the point of this study if it doesn't improve the human experience? Well, it can. And so that's part of what I was referring to before when I said that it's been such a huge awakening for me in my own journey, not just in terms of understanding my own natal chart and my innate energies, but also in understanding what's going on right now. For example, this is a beautiful illustration that's very, very verifiable about the power of the planets and astrology, right? The moon is responsible for the tides. The moon's gravity and energy actually pulls the water on the planet back and forth. It's because of this moon that we actually have the ecosystem on the planet that we do, right? That's how powerful it is in terms of its relationship to the water on the planet. We are mostly water. So the moon is pulling on us too. And this is precisely why there are more emergency room visits, 911 calls, and pregnancies every month at the full moon, right? This is not a coincidence. This is because this is an actual verifiable phenomenon. The issue that most people have with astrology is when they take it as a 100% classical left brain science, It's not. It's a spiritual science. It's both geometry, which is a science, and it's spirituality in terms of the understanding of intuition, archetypes, and symbols, right? Connecting with the subtle energy as well as the gross. And so again, unifying those opposites helps us to transcend them and come to a higher place. And when we can relate to astrology that way, I find that we get the most out of it.
Okay, I feel like I have to ask this because it coincides. So we know that the last century and our time, modern time right now, there's been a lot of acceleration to what we know about everything, the world, astrology, all different religions, cultures, whatever. Merging with astrology, we have been able to tap in through technology what has been going on in the past thousands and thousands of years, centuries and centuries of years, risings and falls of civilizations to what people who studied astrology contained. And so I think I'm answering this, and I think I've answered this right now, just inside of me.
Well, please share with us, because I'm curious. First finish the question, and then share the answer, because I want to know.
Okay. So, my question was like, it started out different, but it transformed into, it's a lot of what we know about astrology based on this whole time that of our past as a human race, what we've collected, or could we say it's more to what we know, what we have absorbed today, and I'm seeing that you can't have one without the other, and both are equally as important, and that's what we have today. And part of my original question, was involving how sure are we that the astrologers in the past and their collective information towards what was happening in their community. I agree with astrology. I agree that the planets are radiators, and I agree that the moon is a very large influence. My question was, how sure can we be that the events that happen in the astrologer's locality, or perhaps they had the awareness to tap into what was going on in the world without outer expressions of the media, internet, perhaps it's recorded in libraries and passed through messengers, riders, like horsemen riders. My question was like, how could they have known something perhaps that was associated from the planet of relationships and love from Venus, correlating to their local experience? This is a very complex answer that I don't think actually really requires an answer. But this is just, yeah. And how could they be so sure that there wasn't something else on the planet that was like anti-love, or I guess opposite towards like prosperity and abundance, going on somewhere else around the world? Like were we sure that they, I don't think it really requires an answer. I think astrology is it's going to be an ever-growing process, and I think there's going to be a time where there's going to be a lot more information. Like right now, it's kind of vague in symbology and like archetypes they're fine and whatnot. But I think there's a lot of clarity. Another way to describe astrology towards the truth of what we know from planets. We know them as there's beings there. We know, well, yeah, we know it. A lot of people maybe listening, maybe unsure, but
there are beings everywhere. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, and there's things everywhere. I don't know if I should continue, but I think it's just interesting.
Well, I think I'll say something about it, because I think it's a really great question, and this is where it's for those people who are interested in astrology. If they're not, then no need to force it down anyone's throat. But if there's a natural intrigue or curiosity, then studying a little bit more deeper can bring a lot of benefit, because there is so much nuance. There's so much nuance and so much subtlety and so much complexity and so many details. And so that's one of my favorite things about it, honestly, with my super Sagittarius nature. Sagittarius and Sage is about knowledge seeking, higher learning, right? And so I love to learn. That's one of the reasons why I know so much, because I just constantly am absorbing information. I find it fascinating and engaging, and I like to do that. So astrology is perfect for me because it's never ending. You can learn about it forever. It's infinite. It's literally infinite in the same that time is in our cycles of our solar system are. So there's no end to the study. So that's something that to just embrace going into it. Just understand that and that's a beautiful thing too on a spiritual level, right? Like constantly being humbled, just how much there is to know. It's like, wow, it's like, magnificent. But even Venus, is traditionally related to as a positive planet, but she has her dark sides: pride, arrogance, ego, right? Vanity. That's Venus right there, right? Because that beauty, that love taken to an extreme also has its negative side. So, people can associate certain planets as mostly positive and mostly negative, and maybe that's true. I think it's easy to fall into pitfalls if we polarize things and look at something as all good or all bad.
Yeah.
Because even Saturn, and Pluto, which tend to be, bad, malefic planets, they have great benefits and transformation. Like Saturn is structure, and as someone who's about breaking down structures and rebelling against them, I've even come to understand at this point in my life where I'm starting to become more structured and the importance and the value of that. There's a value to structure. It's not all bad. It can actually be supportive and beneficial. So again, I would just avoid any tendencies to sort of like figure it all out at once, because it's a infinite study.
Yeah. I heard from one of the sources that you may understand from the type of material that I shared that there was, whether it's relevant or not, I guess there's some reason why I'm sharing it, but I heard that there was like a war on Venus, and they went through a similar thing that Earth went through. But it doesn't have to label a planet for being bad or necessarily good, perhaps, but there's so much, even as I'm saying this right now, there's like, that can't even, I don't know, I'm going to stop talking, but yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I've heard similar stories about Mars and even what was the asteroid
and Mars.
Belt,
Yeah.
the asteroid belt, being a different planet, a whole planet, and there was a civilization there, and that's why it exploded, because there was a similar sort of war-torn thing. Supposedly, we have been working through this karma of warfaring and finding peace for millennia. So I think it's time. I think we're ready to turn that around and let go of the mistakes of the past and forge a new path forward.
Yeah, I think so too. But it's, in the end, it's we the people that must decide, and there are the different potentials, and we will see. But a lot of good things, a lot of bad things, and that's the journey of life, to see that all as part of the whole play of decisions, free will, and being.
You nailed it. Yeah.
All right, my brother. So we're complete. We're done. 2 minute, 2 hour, or no, this is hour 1. It says 2 hours. But
okay. It can't be 2 hours. Maybe
it can't be 2 hours.
20-something minutes.
I think it's messed up. It's been doing that. But anyways.
Well, no, this was really great. I was a little nervous because I didn't know. I was like, am I being interrogated right now? And it wasn't at all. It was just, but I wasn't sure what to expect. I'm like, did I walk myself into a trap? Like, what did I, because I was so open. But you pleasantly surprised me with some really, really poignant and thoughtful inquiries and things. And it was very nice to be able to discuss them with you and, create a platform where maybe other people could also gain value. So thank you for inviting me to do this. And I'm curious to know if you're going to leave it as one piece, if you're going to keep it a video, if you're going to make it an audio. Do you have any plans about any of that? Or
video and audio.
Okay, cool. So yeah, please, send me whatever you can. I don't know if you have the capacity to send the files themselves, or, I could just use a link, I suppose. I'm building up my YouTube channel as well for my business. Now that the website's finally on, I'm going to start, aggregating the videos that I've shot over the past, several months, and work out all those details. So this, I feel, would be a really great video to also showcase on my website and, in different places. So I'd love to share it too.
Awesome. Are you still using WordPress?
No.
Okay.
No, never again.
Okay, what are you using? What program, or is it like multiple?
So it's a program. It's like a Squarespace equivalent, basically. I forget the actual name, but it's with GoDaddy. So they actually have an integrated, program building thing. So yeah, it's worth it. It was worth it. You know, it's a little bit more per month. It was like $10 more, so it's like $30 a month now. But I have the whole e-store integrated and scheduling online integrated, and so it's like it's perfect. It's worth it. So
Awesome. I'll check it out too. I am interested.
cool. Yeah. Please,
So,
thanks.
what is the link? How can people best contact you? That I can link in.
Sure. So I would recommend them to my website, www.rawlifeyoga.com. And then you can find me on Facebook, AM Astrology on Facebook, and also Raw Life Yoga on Instagram. Those, I would say, the top ones to go to.
All right. Thank you, my friend. And so perhaps we'll do this again, but for now, this is the conclusion for Podcasting Transparency. And so if anyone has any comments, questions, and perhaps just wants to be on the show, you're welcome to ask me. And so this is the place where we'll touch on some of the more hard topics that is going on in the world, but it doesn't always have to be hard. And I thank you, everyone, for watching. And that's really all I have to say.
Thanks so much for inviting me, and thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Many blessings to us all.
Goodbye, my brother.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.